construction group, Bayly Holmes Ovcon's half-year headline earnings per share declined by 20% to 633 cents. The group's revenue increased by 16.5% to 8.4 billion rand for the 6 months to December. This is on the back of increased activity levels at its Australia operations. WBHO declared an interim dividend of 110 cents. Daniel, 20% down on the headline earnings front. We've got margins also decreasing, operating margins sitting at 5.5% from 8.5% previously.
So it just shows the construction sector, the margins are getting less and less. I've discussed the construction companies for some reason so many times in these shows. I always end up with the construction shares to talk about, and I've been saying that at some stage they will turn. And I still believe that, and Bayly Holmes is probably one of the better construction companies in the market. It's known to have very, very good management, and historically, having a look at the performance of Bayly Holmes versus the other construction shares from its highs in 2008, Bayly has been the most resilient. It's down about 25% from its highs in 2008 compared to Murray & Roberts, which is down about 75%, and the other one that I'd like to throw in was a Veng, which is down 55%. So it just shows it's been the most resilient, but yes, nonetheless,
it's
results
better of the lot when you look at that kind
better
of
the lot, and it just shows it's the preferred construction company, probably the best run, but yes, still a lot of headwinds, and with a lot of promises coming from government, State of the Nation addresses that there'll be more infrastructure spend going forward. They've been promised that so many times, but hopefully this year it will come through.
Okay, so I wish Simon Brown was here actually, because beginning of last year he was actually talking about how fantastic all the construction companies look. They're still basically perhaps even in worse position than what they were last year. The problem is here, Chris, is when you look at these margins, they're still under pressure. I mean, 5.5% from 8.5%. Bayly, though, seems to be in a better position than a lot of the other construction companies that are even sitting closer to the 0% level, because they take on work just so that they can continue working.
Yes, and in many instances what's happening is they're actually taking on that work, they're getting no margin at all, they're just keeping their workforce employed basically in anticipation of better times coming. Do you know, when I was an honest journalist a few years ago, I remember speaking to an economist about the...
Did you say an honest journalist a few years ago?
Yes, yes. I talked to this economist. I was writing for this overseas magazine, and we were talking about the coming construction boom, and he said to me, you know, the World Cup, that's just a drop in the ocean, nothing, a train drop in the ocean. The really big thing is going to be the 875 billion rands worth of infrastructural work that we're going to be getting in South Africa over the next 5 to 10 years. Well, we're still waiting for it, you know. It's just not materializing. And I think that is the one thing that is problematic for so many of these construction companies. They've geared up for this kind of thing. Bayly, if you look at their earnings growth pattern over the past 15 or 20 years, until very recently, it was a largely unbroken pattern. As Dan says, you know, this is a quality company, and again, it's ironic that a company of this quality is now seeing this kind of reversal of fortune.
When you look at what's happening in the Western Cape, a lot of competition coming through, but the company has now been involved in the waterfront development that is coming through there. They even talk on Australia, still very fierce competition. The truth is there's competition all round, and that is because there's just not enough work around. So the tender process is becoming far more difficult than what it was before.
And that's why the margins are getting less and less. Heavily increased competition, and the Australian business is actually 50% of their revenue at the moment, so they're not relying too heavily on South Africa as a whole. So 50% of their revenue does come from Australia. They've got a nice stake which they've just increased in a company called ProBuild, I think from 76 to 78%, and that business relies quite heavily on civil engineering on the back of mining. So they seem to say as long as there's good demand for resources from the likes of China and emerging markets, they'll need to spend money on their mines, and they'll be doing the civil engineering and infrastructure around that as well. So the Australian division performing very, very well, and about, I think it's 69% of their, or 59%, or 61%, sorry, 61% of their revenue is from abroad, and 39% from local.
And the truth is, I mean, they're in Zambia, Botswana, Mozambique, Ghana, Sierra Leone, recently Guinea as well.
Well, as I just said, 40% is
yeah.
coming from South Africa only. So it's nice to see they're not focused only on South Africa and also abroad, of course. But generally good. I think, again, I'm bullish on the whole sector. I like Wilson Bayly Holmes. They've done a good job of managing to stick around.
So hot for you then?
I think hot for me, yes.
Yeah.
It's probably, as I said, the best construction sector in the stock in the sector. They've got a very healthy pipeline. I think it's 21 billion rand going forward. They're probably the #1 builder of retail shopping centres, so very favoured in the construction sector.
Chris, hot or not for you?
It's not hot again, unfortunately, but and let me qualify that, Mark, and saying if I had to choose a construction stock at this point
But
in
you're
time,
so safe, Chris. You normally play it quite safe.
Well, there we
Do you
go.
want to admit that?
Look, we don't like the construction sector. We reckon
Yeah.
it's going to be out in the cold for the next couple of years at least, maybe even longer. That being the case, we don't go for any of them. If I had to choose one, it would be Wilson Bayly Holmes.